One of the things Paddington liked most about living with the Brown family was that he made lots of new friends. The nicest one of all was Mr. Gruber. Mr. Gruber kept an antique shop in the Portobello Road, and most mornings they had their elevenses together. What Mr. Gruber didn't know about antiques wasn't worth knowing, and to enter his shop was like entering another world. So when he arrived one morning and found that his friend appeared to be washing one of his pictures, he was most surprised. "Don't worry, Mr. Brown," explained Mr. Gruber. "I'm only restoring it." "So?" Paddington looked at it doubtfully. "It doesn't seem to be one thing or the other, Mr. Gruber," he said. "Ah," said Mr. Gruber, "there's more in paintings than meets the eye. You see, in the old days, Mr. Brown, artists were often so poor they had to do their paintings on top of old canvases. Sometimes if you clean a painting, you find a much more valuable one underneath. Do you realize, Mr. Brown, this could be an old master?" "It looks more like an old mistress to me, Mr. Gruber," said Paddington. Paddington turned the matter over in his mind all the way home, and by the time he reached number 32 Windsor Gardens, he was very thoughtful indeed. Mr. Brown had lots of pictures, and one of them had been standing in the front room for several days now, doing absolutely nothing. "I think," he announced to the world in general, "I may try restoring it for him. I expect he'll like that." Paddington had a hopeful nature, but as time went on, he began to get a bit worried. Far from being restored, Mr. Brown's picture looked as if it would never be quite the same again. Worse still, there was no sign of another painting underneath. It was, to say the least of it, a mess. It was only when he tried turning it round the other way that he discovered there was a label on the back. It said, "Property of Mr. Henry Brown, entry for the Portobello Road Art Society Painting Competition, to be collected." Mr. Brown's painting had started out as a study of some boats on a lake. Now it looked more like a storm at sea. Even with real paints, Paddington wouldn't have fancied his chances of repairing the damage, but with only tomato sauce and marmalade to work with, he had a nasty feeling there might well be an even bigger storm before the day was out. Paddington went to bed early that afternoon, suffering from a mysterious attack of something called restoritis. It was a most unusual complaint, which had caused him to come out in red and orange spots. If they looked suspiciously like tomato sauce and marmalade stains, he managed to hide the fact behind a large bowl of calves' foot jelly, Mrs. Bird's recipe for all ills. It wasn't until much later on, when he heard a strange voice downstairs, that he decided to put in an appearance again. "Remarkable use of colour," said the voice. "Most unusual, using marmalade chunks instead of paint." To Paddington's surprise, Mr. Brown's picture was occupying a position of honour in the middle of the room, and on the frame there was a large red rosette. "That means it's won first prize," explained Judy. "I didn't know you painted abstracts, Dad," said Jonathan. "I don't," said Mr. Brown, "but I'd like to abstract an answer from whoever did do it." "I was really looking for an old master, Mr. Brown," said Paddington, "but I'm afraid it went wrong." "It looks more like a young bear to me," said the judge, "and I'll say one thing, it not only looks good, it tastes good as well. Try some." "Thank you very much," said Paddington, "but I think you'll find it tastes even nicer if you stand it the right way up."